What should we believe when people talk about JT Barrett? That to me is the crux of this entire game week for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Doug Maurice along with Ari Wasserman here at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. And we know that JT Barrett is going to make his first start in his first college football game on Saturday in Baltimore against Navy for the Buckeyes. What I still feel like we don't have a grasp of, Ari, is how big a deal that is. Because when you talk to the Buckeyes, they of course express confidence in JT Barrett. They of course express confidence in the rest of the offense. But sometimes I feel like we're brushing over the fact that this guy has never played before. Am I making, is that too much of a thing in my mind? Or how much should we be thinking about he has never played?
I think that we're on the same page in the sense that it is driving me crazy that there are a lot of people who still think Ohio State is the favorite to win this division and potentially the conference, just assuming that JT Barrett's going to be fine. And maybe he will be. Maybe he'll be a solid option, but I know one thing for a fact. He's not going to be Braxton Miller, and he's not going to make the plays that Braxton Miller can make just from a physical standpoint. So to me, JT Barrett's maturity is one thing, but it's a whole new discussion of who is this team going to lean on now. So obviously JT Barrett's going to have to be the leader. He's going to have to make plays. He's going to have to distribute the ball. But before this was so much easier to dissect because you have Braxton and he's going to make plays. But now, not only is JT Barrett inexperienced, and you can't discount that at all, but everybody that he's going to be relying on is inexperienced. So what does an inexperienced quarterback do when he's surrounded by inexperience? And that's a huge question to me, and something that a lot of people are ignoring completely.
Urban Meyer talked on Monday about the idea that the Buckeyes have 6 receivers that they feel confident in at this point and that all will play. 2 of those are senior starters from a couple years, guys who have been around in Devin Smith and Evan Spencer. The other 4 guys in that mix are Michael Thomas, Corey Smith, and Jalen Marshall, who all redshirted last year, and Dontre Wilson, who's a sophomore, who certainly was a part of the offense last year, but really wasn't a receiver.
31 touches total.
So you have guys that you assume have talent because they're at Ohio State and because they were highly recruited, but there's still a lot of questions about, can they run the right routes? Can they find openings? Will they catch the ball when the ball is delivered to them? And then you have an offensive line where Taylor Decker's the only guy who's ever started before. So now you have an offensive line that's inexperienced. And again, you can assume Ed Warrener's going to get him ready, all that stuff. We've just never seen it. And you're adding these levels of uncertainty to a completely uncertain quarterback. And so I think that the point I think we agree on is, if this was last year and you could lean on that line, lean on Carlos Hyde, lean on a couple things, I think it would be easier for an inexperienced quarterback to find his way. I think there are going to be bumps now because they're all going to be learning together.
Well, I think last week, 8 days ago, Ohio State was going to be good in spite of their inexperience because they had a guy like Braxton Miller. So if that was a fact then that means that Ohio State would have had to function with Braxton Miller despite all of the insecurity or the inexperience around him. So it can't be the same thing now, because you're replacing the guy who's going to make the inexperienced offense go with somebody who hasn't had any experience. And I know that it seems like we're being downers here when you kind of see the overwhelming sentiment from everybody around of just Ohio State being the same team that they were, but Doug, they're not. In my opinion, the assuming thing isn't we're not supposed to assume that Ohio State's going to be good because they're Ohio State. What we do is we take a look at what they were with Braxton Miller, what they are now as a completely different team, and analyze it based on what we think is going to happen. If they stun the world and they do the unthinkable, and JT Barrett is a great quarterback and they go to the Big Ten championship game, that's the story then. What the story is right now is Ohio State is a completely inexperienced team, and you cannot just assume that because they're at Ohio State, they're just going to score 42 points a game or whatever it was again. It doesn't work that way. Prove it, do it, then it's a story. It's not a story first.
It's hard because I think people get give a lot of praise and get excited when your offensive line is a bunch of veterans, when you have guys back who've done it before. And, there's good reason for that. But if you were excited to have a guy who's going to be a 4-year starter at quarterback, then the other side of that has to be questions when guys haven't done it before. It's not impossible. It's college football. We have seen young players come in and do great things. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. There's constant turnover. But one of the things is often I think a lot of these young quarterbacks who have succeeded can have some older guys to lean on. And that's why I think I don't know who the leading receiver on this team is going to be. I don't know who the leading rusher on this team is going to be. I don't know about the 4 starters on the offensive line other than Taylor Decker. That's all the stuff that JT Barrett is walking into. So it's an interesting discussion. We're curious for what you guys think in the comments. It's part of what this is, but I think you and I are just sort of filled with this overwhelming question of how do you really know anything, especially offensively? How do you really know anything right now?
Well, I think, too, that recruiting is such a big thing. I spent so much time writing about it. We spend so much time talking about it and researching it. But there's more to it than that a lot of times. And I've never really seen it. I mean, I can't think of, a time at Ohio State, at least in my 5-6 years on the beat now, that they've ever had to rely on this many young talent all at once. If Braxton comes in, then maybe he has some seniors around him, or, but like, there is a question mark at every single position on the offense. The line, tight end, Jeff Hireman is not 100%. We don't know how available he's going to be for Navy. There's 6 wide receivers, which mean none of the 6 have stood out, in my opinion. The starting running back broke his wrist. And then this freshman's going to come in and it's just going to be fine? That's not an explanation for me. The story will be what it is when it happens. I'm not going to assume that it's going to be okay. It sounds like they've got a lot to figure out.
Will make for an interesting Saturday. We, of course, will be in Baltimore on Saturday. Ohio State versus Navy with a noon kickoff. Thanks, as always, for following along here at cleveland.com. For Ari Wasserman, I'm Doug Maurice.